You fired her for helping a veteran? What a disgrace. Sarah, a kind-hearted waitress, lost her job for giving a meal to a homeless veteran. But just hours later, a decorated general walked into the diner, and what happened next left everyone speechless. The smell of burnt coffee and overcooked bacon clung to Miller's diner like a bad habit. It was late, the kind of late where even the neon sign looked like it was ready to quit. Sarah had been on her feet all day, running orders for truckers who left crumbs and lousy tips. Then he walked in. The door creaked, heads turned, and the air shifted. An old man in a faded military jacket, the kind that had seen too many winters and too few washes, shuffled toward the counter. His boots were scuffed, his hands trembled slightly, and his eyes, those eyes had seen more than anyone in this diner ever would. And just like that, the whispering started. "Another one of those bums," muttered some guy in a cheap suit. "They should go to a shelter," chimed in a woman, clutching her purse a little tighter. Sarah bit her tongue. The man studied the menu like he was doing math in his head, probably figuring out what he could afford, then barely above a whisper, "How much for just a plain sandwich?" Sarah didn't even hesitate. "It's on the house." The man froze, pride fighting hunger, but in the end, hunger won. "Thank you, miss." She had just slapped the sandwich on the grill when Doug, her manager, 6 feet of bad attitude in an apron, marched up. "Tell me you didn't just give away food again." Sarah didn't even turn. "It's a sandwich, Doug, not a gold bar." "I don't care if he fought in every war since 1776, Doug hissed. "No money, no food. You do this again, you're done." Sarah sighed, placed the plate in front of the veteran, and met Doug's glare head on. "Enjoy your meal, sir." The old man nodded, eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place. "Thank you." He stood, moving with slow dignity, and walked out. The whispers followed him to the door. Sarah turned back to her shift, not knowing that her world was about to be turned upside down. Morning came too fast. The sun barely peeked over the horizon when Sarah walked into Miller's diner, rubbing sleep from her eyes, ready for another long shift. She had no idea she was about to walk into a disaster. Doug was already there, standing behind the counter like a king on his miserable little throne. But something was different. He wasn't scowling at a dirty table or barking at the line cook. No, he was waiting. And in his hand, an envelope. Sarah's stomach dropped. "Gina." "You're fired," Doug said, flat as a week-old pancake. He tossed the envelope onto the counter like it was burning his fingers. "Clear out your locker. Maybe your veteran friend can buy you breakfast." The diner went silent. Even the coffee machine stopped gurgling. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Sure, she had seen this coming, but that didn't make it hurt any less. 6 years, 6 years of double shifts, of remembering regulars' orders, of covering for sick coworkers, all gone, just like that. "Doug, come on." No arguments. His voice had that smug, self-satisfied tone that made her want to throw a coffee pot at his head. "You break the rules, you're out. That's how business works." Oh, he was loving this. Sarah swallowed hard. She could argue, she could beg, but what would be the point? Slowly, she grabbed the envelope. Her final paycheck. Not much, maybe enough to cover rent for a couple of weeks. After that, her throat tightened, but she wasn't going to let Doug see her crack. She turned, walked past the booths, where customers suddenly found their plates very interesting, past the counter where she had spent countless hours pouring coffee and faking smiles. As she reached the door, she hesitated. Then, without looking back, she squared her shoulders and walked out. The cold morning air hit her like a slap. She stood on the sidewalk, gripping the envelope so tight her fingers ached. No job, no backup plan, no idea what to do next. Her rent was due in 2 weeks. After that, who knew? Sarah took a shaky breath, blinking back the sting in her eyes. She did the right thing. That mattered, didn't it? But right now, the only thing she felt was lost. What she didn't know was that life was about to throw her into something much, much bigger. And the man she helped? Yay, he wasn't done with her yet. The lunch rush at Miller's diner was in full swing when everything changed. Engines rumbled outside. Not the usual sputter of an old truck or the lazy hum of a passing sedan. No, this was different, loud, commanding. Then brakes. Sharp, precise. Heads turned as a black SUV rolled to a stop in front of the diner. The kind of SUV that didn't just drop by places like this. The doors opened in perfect synchronization, and out stepped two tall men in crisp military uniforms, their posture rigid, calculated, the kind of presence that made a room go quiet before they even stepped inside. And then, him. A man in his 60s, dressed in a pristine, decorated military uniform, strode through the diner doors like he owned the place. His chest was covered in medals, each one gleaming under the cheap fluorescent lights, a living legend in full display. People froze. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the coffee pot behind the counter stopped dripping. Doug, who had just been counting change like his life depended on it, looked up, and his face lost all color. Because everyone in that diner recognized the man standing before them. General Thomas Hayward, a name that carried weight, one of the most respected military figures in the country. He didn't need to clear his throat, didn't need to raise his voice. He simply looked Doug in the eye. "Where is the girl who worked here yesterday?" Doug blinked. His mouth opened, then closed again. He fumbled for words. The same man who had no problem barking orders at a waitress now looked like a kid caught stealing from the cookie jar. We fired her." General Hayward tilted his head ever so slightly. "Mistake." Silence. Even the customers, the same ones who had whispered about the old veteran the night before, sat frozen, their food untouched. "Ta-ta. Yesterday," Hayward continued, his voice steady, unshakable, "my life changed." Doug gulped. The general stepped forward. "The man she fed?" He let the words settle in the air. "He was my old brother in arms, a man I fought beside, a man I thought I lost forever." A murmur rippled through the diner. "For years, I had no idea where he was. And then yesterday, for the first time in decades, he told me he felt like a human being again." Doug shifted uncomfortably. His fingers twitched on the counter like he wanted to disappear. "Because of her." The general's voice hardened. "Because she saw a soldier, not a problem. Because she treated him with dignity while the rest of you—" His gaze swept the room, looked the other way. No one spoke. Hayward took a slow breath, steadying himself, then firm, unwavering. "Where is she now?" Sarah sat on a worn-out park bench, her fingers gripping the edge as she stared at the cracked pavement beneath her feet. The morning air was crisp, but the weight in her chest made it feel heavier than it should. She had been sitting there for over an hour, trying to piece together a plan. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Applications? Sure, she could start sending them out, but where? Another dead-end diner? Another job with another Doug? She sighed, rubbing her temples. She had done the right thing. She knew that. But doing the right thing didn't pay the bills. And then, the sound of tires rolling over gravel. A black SUV pulled up a few feet away. Not just any black SUV, the black SUV. Sarah tensed as the door swung open, and before she could fully process what was happening, a uniformed man stepped out. "Say, miss, General Hayward would like to speak with you." Sarah's stomach flipped. She looked up, and there he was, General Thomas Hayward, standing tall, hands folded neatly behind his back, every inch of him radiating authority. The very man who had walked into Miller's diner like a storm and left Doug gasping for air. Sarah scrambled to her feet, her pulse hammering in her ears. "You didn't even know who you were helping," Hayward said, his voice calm, steady. A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Sarah swallowed hard. "No, sir, I didn't." "That's what makes it important," he continued. "You didn't do it because of who he was. You did it because it was the right thing to do, and that's the kind of person I need." She blinked. "Wait, what?" Hayward studied her expression, then continued. I'm putting together a team for a new project. We're working with veterans, men and women who've served this country, and now need a way forward. I need people with integrity. People who don't wait for a reward to do the right thing." He paused. "Are you interested?" Sarah felt something in her chest shift. It had been hours since Doug tossed that paycheck at her like it was nothing. Hours since she walked out of that diner feeling like she had lost everything. And now, standing in front of her, was a man offering her something bigger than just a job, purpose, a chance to actually make a difference. Her throat tightened. She straightened her back and met his gaze. Yes, sir. 1 week later, Sarah walked through the doors of the Veterans Rehabilitation Center, a place dedicated to helping those who had given everything for their country. No more slinging coffee for guys like Doug. No more pretending a paycheck was worth selling her soul. Now, she spent her days working with people who needed real help, people who deserved it. As for Miller's Diner, it didn't last. Turns out, word spreads fast when you fire a waitress for feeding a veteran. Customers stopped coming. The place went under in less than 2 months. Doug? Well, let's just say, the last time Sarah passed by the old diner, there was a for-lease sign in the window, and a very familiar man sitting inside nursing a coffee, alone. Justice? Oh yeah, that tasted even better than free coffee.